Have you ever felt something inside you desperately trying to break free? A talent hidden away while you moved through life invisible to everyone else? This Elena Moretti's story. A woman whose greatest gift remained secret until one afternoon when courage found her, if only for a moment. In Boston's prestigious Hawthorne Library, a renowned institution where literary scholars shaped academic discourse, Elena moved like a shadow. At 31, she reshelved books with practiced efficiency, head down, shoulders hunched. She had perfected invisibility, not from confidence, but from fear of being judged. What library patrons never guessed was that behind Elena's downcast eyes lived a soul that soared far beyond Boston. For 7 years, she had journeyed through operatic areas from her small apartment. It began after losing her father, Marco Moretti, whose life had been defined by unrealized dreams. "One day I'll perform at La Scala," Marco would tell Elena. Italy with its opera houses, Vienna with its concert halls, New York with its Metropolitan. But a stroke took Marco before his voice touched a single professional stage. The night after the funeral, Elena found her father's dusty collection of opera recordings. "I'll sing for you, Papa," she whispered, tears falling onto the worn album covers. Unable to afford formal training, Elena downloaded tutorials and began vocalizing alone. What started as tribute became passion. Over 7 years, she progressed from basic scales to complex arias through YouTube videos and online masterclasses. Opera captivated her, each note a small miracle, each phrase a cascade of emotion. But no one at Hawthorne Library knew this side of her. To co-workers, she was quiet Elena, who took unwanted shifts. To Victoria Reynolds, the library's executive director, she was barely furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. Elena, Victoria's sharp voice, would cut through the quiet stacks. The linguistic section needs reorganizing, and the VIP reading room needs setup for tomorrow. The Philharmonic Foundation people are particular. Elena would nod, never mentioning she could recite Puccini arias or explain the emotional nuances of Verdi in perfect Italian. Who would believe her? Who would care? Only George, the 70-year-old retired music teacher, who visited daily with weathered hands and perceptive eyes, seemed to see something in Elena. "You know your problem, dear," he said once, finding her humming O mio babino caro while organizing the music section. "You've got gold inside your throat, but you're walking around like you're made of dust. The world won't hear what you don't sing." Elena quickly fell silent. "It's just a hobby, George." His eyes crinkled with frustration. "The things you're best at might never be heard, but don't let them die in silence. That would be the real tragedy." Little did Elena know that within 24 hours, those words would echo as her carefully constructed invisibility came crashing down, beginning with a piano that no one at Hawthorne Library was prepared to play. No one except the woman who shelved books while dreaming in another language of notes and phrases. What would you do if your moment arrived unexpectedly? Would you step forward or back? Sometimes life's greatest opportunities arrive disguised as moments of terror. For Elena Moretti, that moment was coming. If you want to discover how a single act of courage changed everything for this invisible woman, stay with us. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the most ordinary people, those we pass daily without truly seeing. What would you do if you were in Elena's position? Would you find the courage to step forward when every instinct tells you to stay hidden? The morning of the Philharmonic Foundation reception, Elena arrived early. The library buzzed with activity preparing for 50 international musicians and patrons. Rumors spread Maestro Domenico Ricci himself would attend, the youngest conductor ever appointed to the National Symphony, known for his unorthodox approach and piercing musical intuition. "Everyone needs absolute best behavior," Victoria announced at the staff meeting, her gaze lingering on Elena. "And these people expect perfection. Stick to your assigned duties and nothing else." Elena nodded, feeling a familiar ache, another reminder of her place. As the meeting dispersed, she overheard Victoria speaking to James, the reference desk supervisor. "Put Elena in the archives today," Victoria said loudly. "That's where most of the Italian visitors will want to see the Puccini manuscripts. At least if she's down there, guests won't have to see her struggling to communicate." Elena's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down. If only Victoria knew. But why would it matter? Elena had resigned herself to underestimation long ago as she pushed her cart toward the service elevator. George appeared beside her. "Heard you got the archives," he said casually. "The universe has a funny way of putting us exactly where we need to be, doesn't it?" Elena frowned. "It's just Victoria being Victoria. She thinks I'm too awkward for the Foundation people." George chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe something interesting will happen down there." The elevator arrived and George stepped back. "Remember what I said, kid? Don't die in silence." The archives were quieter than expected. Most guests were at the reception, allowing Elena to work efficiently, occasionally humming arias to herself. On a desk, she found a program open to a page about Domenico Ricci. The headline read, "Maestro Ricci Revolutionizing Outreach Programs. Conductor Seeks Raw Talent Over Pedigree." By afternoon, Elena moved to preparing the private reading room, a quiet space where reception attendees could retreat. She worked methodically, assuming she was alone. Then she heard a voice. "No, that's not what I'm saying at all." A man spoke urgently into his phone. "I understand there's a scheduling conflict, but this performance is too important to fall apart over miscommunication." Elena continued working, trying not to eavesdrop, but the man's voice grew distressed. "Hello? Are you still there? Can anyone help with this piece? This is ridiculous. I need someone who understands Italian opera right now." Through the door crack, Elena saw a tall man pacing, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. She recognized him from the program, Domenico Ricci himself. "I'm losing the most important soloist of the season because no one in this entire library can play through this piece," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Elena froze, heart pounding. She could help, but approaching Maestro Ricci, drawing attention to herself, made her palms sweat. What if she made a mistake? What if her pitch wasn't perfect? What if he laughed at her presumption? George's words echoed. Don't let them die in silence. For 7 years, she'd carried her father's dreams. For 7 years, she'd hidden her abilities, convinced they weren't good enough. And now, beyond that door, was a moment that aligned perfectly with her hidden talent. Elena stood paralyzed between two forces, the lifetime habit of making herself small and the sudden desire to be brave just once. Domenico was practically shouting now, "Please, if there's anyone who can sight read this aria, this is urgent. The soprano from Milan is arriving for rehearsal in 2 hours, and we've spent months planning this fundraiser." Elena took a deep breath, then another. Her hand trembled, reaching for the door. "I can't," she whispered. "I just can't." She turned away, ready to disappear down the hallway as thousands of times before. But seeing her reflection in the polished elevator doors, small, hunched, fading, she suddenly saw her father's face filled with dreams never pursued. Before she could reconsider, Elena turned back. Her feet carried her forward as if possessed by a will stronger than fear. "Excuse me," she said, her voice so soft Domenico didn't hear her. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Excuse me, Maestro Ricci. I know this aria. I could help if you want." Domenico turned, surprise evident as he took in her library uniform, the cart visible behind her. For a moment, Elena thought he might dismiss her, but desperation won over skepticism. "You know Il bel sogno di Doretta?" he asked uncertainly. Elena nodded, mouth dry. "Yes, I can sight read the piano part and sing it for you if you'd like." Domenico hesitated briefly before gesturing toward the baby grand piano in the corner. "The score is there. Our soloist needs to hear the orchestral reduction and vocal line to prepare, but this is complex Puccini." Elena's hands shook approaching the piano. But when she began playing and then singing, everything changed. Her voice grew stronger, confident, the notes flowing naturally as she lost herself in Puccini's soaring melody. The surprised expression on Domenico's face shifted to focus, then wonder, as Elena's soprano filled the room with unexpected brilliance. For 8 minutes, Elena performed the demanding aria, her fingers nimble on the accompaniment, her voice pure and expressive. The technical challenges dissolved as years of private practice revealed themselves. As the final note faded, Elena suddenly became aware of what she'd done. She had stepped out of shadows, made herself visible, and now Domenico Ricci was looking at her, really looking at her, with an expression of stunned revelation. "I'm sorry for interrupting," she said quickly, standing from the piano. "I should get back to work." "Wait," Domenico said, but Elena was already retreating, her face burning with self-consciousness. "Thank you," he called after her, but she was gone, hurrying down service stairs rather than waiting for the elevator. For the rest of her shift, Elena alternated between exhilaration and terror. She had done it for 8 precious minutes. She had been more than invisible, been valuable, capable, extraordinary. But as she finished her shift, reality settled back. Tomorrow she would return to being just Elena the librarian. The moment would fade. Life would continue as before. Or so she thought, until she found George waiting at the employee exit, a knowing smile crinkling his face. "Heard something interesting happen downstairs today," he said casually. Elena tensed. "Who told you?" "Nobody needed to. It's all over your face," George chuckled. "The question is, now that you've let that voice soar for a minute, are you ready for what comes next?" "Nothing's coming next," Elena insisted, pulling her coat tighter. "It was just a one-time thing." George shook his head, eyes twinkling with something like pride. "Kid, when you fill a silent room with that kind of sound, people notice. You just revealed yourself to the whole world." As Elena walked to the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted beneath her ordinary life. For the first time in years, she felt both terrified and alive. She had no way of knowing that upstairs, Domenico Ricci was making a phone call that would change everything. "Yes," he said, watching the Boston skyline from the library window. "I need information about one of your employees, a librarian who sings like she belongs at La Scala. I believe I found something extraordinary hiding in plain sight." Morning arrived with a sense of unreality. Elena had barely slept, replaying yesterday's events, alternating between pride in her momentary courage and anxiety about consequences. What if she had overstepped? What if Domenico had complained? At work, everything seemed unnervingly normal. No one mentioned the incident. Even Victoria treated her with the usual dismissive attitude. "Archives again," Victoria said, barely glancing at Elena. "And the Philharmonic Foundation people have requested the reading room be prepared by noon for a private audition. Make sure everything is immaculate." Elena nodded, relief washing over her. Perhaps Domenico hadn't mentioned the interaction. Perhaps it had meant nothing to him, just a convenient solution to a temporary problem. As she worked, Elena tried convincing herself that yesterday's bravery was an anomaly, a brief departure from safe invisibility. Yet something had changed inside her, a small flame refusing to be extinguished. While organizing books in the biography section, she caught sight of herself in the reflective glass of a display case and paused. For the first time in years, she really looked at her reflection, not just checking for dust, but seeing the person staring back. Her father's eyes looked back, filled with a question Elena couldn't quite answer. "It doesn't change anything," she told her reflection. "One moment doesn't change a life." But as the words left her mouth, they felt hollow. Deep down, Elena knew some moments, rare as they might be, held power to change everything. At 11:45, Elena arrived at the reading room to prepare for the audition. She worked efficiently, arranging chairs, adjusting the piano bench, setting out water pitchers. As she finished, Victoria entered with 2 senior library administrators. "Good, you're almost done," Victoria said critically. "The Philharmonic team will be here any minute. I need you to." The door opened, and Domenico Ricci walked in with 2 assistants. The library administrators straightened, professional smiles appearing. "Maestro Ricci," one began, "we trust everything has been satisfactory." Domenico nodded politely, but seemed distracted, his eyes moving past them until landing on Elena, who was trying to make herself invisible near the service door. "Actually," he said, "there is something specific I wanted to discuss." Elena's heart dropped. Here it was, the complaint, the reprimand for stepping out of her place. "I had an extraordinary experience yesterday," Domenico continued, gaze fixed on Elena. "One of your employees revealed musical talent that frankly belongs on professional stages through an extraordinary display of vocal and pianistic skill." The library administrators exchanged confused glances. "I'm sorry, Maestro Ricci," the senior administrator said. "I'm not aware of any staff providing musical services. We have professional musicians we can call when needed." "You weren't aware," Domenico replied, "because the person who helped me wasn't from your music department. She was from your library staff." All eyes turned to Elena, who wished the floor would swallow her whole. Victoria gave a dismissive laugh. There must be some mistake. Our library staff doesn't. Elena, Domenico interrupted, addressing her directly. That is your name, correct? Elena nodded, unable to find her voice. Would you mind demonstrating your musical abilities again? Perhaps perform a section of what you sang yesterday to verify for your management. The room fell silent, all eyes on Elena. This was her feared moment, being put on display, judged, found wanting. Her instinct screamed to run, to hide, to deny everything. But something stronger held her in place. Perhaps the memory of those 8 minutes when she had been more than invisible, when her voice had mattered. Yes, I can do that, she managed, voice barely audible. With trembling steps, Elena approached the piano. She settled onto the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and after a deep breath began to play and sing. With each note of Puccini's Aria, the expressions around her transformed from skepticism to surprise to astonishment. When she finished, Domenico smiled. Perfect performance. Better than many professionals I've hired. Victoria's face had drained of color. I had no idea, she stammered, shooting Elena a look mingling shock with resentment. Clearly, Domenico replied coolly. He turned back to Elena. How long have you been studying opera? 7 years, sir. Self-taught. Remarkable, Domenico said admiringly. And why haven't you pursued this professionally? With your talent, you could be performing with major companies. The question hung heavily. Why was she shelving books when she could do so much more? It was the question Elena had buried deep inside. I never thought I was good enough, she admitted, the truth painful in its simplicity. And I didn't have credentials or connections. It was just something I did for myself. Domenico nodded, as if reaching a decision. I have a proposition for you. My foundation runs an emerging artist program. We need people with natural ability and dedication. People like you. Elena stared, uncomprehending. I'd like to offer you a place in our program, Domenico continued. Initially, as a featured soloist in our upcoming fundraiser concert. If that goes well, we can discuss a permanent position with the National Symphony's vocal ensemble. The room seemed to tilt. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. But I'm just she began. A remarkably talented individual who has been underestimated, Domenico finished. Including by yourself, it seems. Victoria stepped forward, professional mask in place. Maestro Ricci, while Elena's hidden talent is impressive, there are realities to consider. She has no formal training, no degree, no performance experience. Perhaps we could arrange a professional vocalist instead, someone more suitable for your elite audience. The implication hung in the air. Elena wasn't the right kind of person for Domenico's world. She belonged behind a book cart. Elena felt herself shrinking, the familiar weight of inadequacy pressing down. Victoria was right. Who was she to think she could step onto such a stage? But then Domenico spoke, cutting through Elena's spiral of self-doubt. Ms. Reynolds, isn't it? He addressed Victoria directly. Let me ask you something. Yesterday when I needed someone who understood that Puccini, where were your professional musicians? Where was anyone willing to step forward and help? Victoria had no answer. Elena was the only person who combined ability with courage, Domenico continued. She saw a need and had the bravery to fill it despite obvious personal discomfort. That's exactly the kind of artist I want representing my foundation. He turned back to Elena, his expression softening. Of course, the decision is yours. This would be a significant change, and I understand if you need time to consider. Time seemed to stand still as Elena stood at the crossroads of her life. Before stretched 2 paths, the familiar road of invisibility, of safety and smallness, and the terrifying, exhilarating unknown of stepping into her full potential. She thought of her father, who died with dreams unfulfilled, of George's words about not dying in silence, of the person glimpsed in the mirror that morning, someone with her father's eyes and untapped courage. I don't need time, Elena said, her voice steadier than expected. I would be honored to accept your offer. The words hung irrevocable. Elena had stepped off the edge of her small, safe world into freefall. Domenico smiled. Excellent. We'll handle details with your management. I'd like you to join our rehearsal this afternoon, if possible. The senior library administrator, quickly adapting, nodded enthusiastically. Of course, we'd be happy to release Elena from her duties immediately. Victoria's face flushed with barely contained frustration. But what about her responsibilities here? We're already short-staffed, and replacing her on such short notice will be challenging but manageable, the administrator cut in smoothly. We're all delighted for Elena, aren't we, Miss Reynolds? Victoria's smile was tight. Of course. How fortunate for her. As the group dispersed to make arrangements, Elena found herself alone with Domenico. Thank you, she said, still processing everything. I don't understand why you take a chance on someone like me. Domenico studied her curiously. Someone like you? You mean someone who mastered opera through sheer discipline and stepped forward when it counted? I don't take chances on people like that. I invest in them. Before Elena could respond, Victoria returned, all business. Elena, you'll need to return your ID badge and collect your things, she said, then quieter. Quite the Cinderella story, isn't it? Just remember, when the clock strikes midnight, not everyone keeps the glass slipper. 2 days ago, those words would have stung. But Elena had changed. Thanks for your concern, Victoria, she replied calmly. But I think I'll decide what world I'm cut out for. 3 hours later, Elena sat in the rehearsal hall at Symphony Center, dressed in borrowed clothes. Not a uniform, but not quite performance attire either. She listened carefully, unsure when or if to join in. Then Domenico turned to her. Elena, you've been quiet. Would you try this passage? From measure 32. Every eye turned to her. Elena could stay safe or step up. I think the phrasing needs more space to breathe, she began, voice steadying. In Italian opera, emotion drives the tempo, not the other way around. She demonstrated, singing the phrase with subtle rubato and emotional depth. As she sang, heads nodded. Domenico watched her with approval. By rehearsal's end, she had shifted from silent observer to valued contributor. Sophia, Domenico's assistant conductor, approached afterward. We're finalizing the concert program. You'll need formal attire. Do you have a gown? Elena shook her head. I've never performed in public. Sophia didn't blink. We'll arrange it. Domenico says you're essential. Essential. The word echoed in her mind as she exited the Symphony Center. This time through the grand lobby, not the service hallway. The city outside looked different, brighter, possible. At the bus stop, George was waiting. Heard there was some excitement at the library, he said, grinning. Something about a librarian becoming a diva. Elena smiled. How do you always know? I pay attention, George said, to everyone. She hesitated. I'm scared. What if I'm not what they think I am? George nodded. Fear and excitement feel the same. The only difference is the story you tell yourself. He looked at her. So what's your story, Elena Moretti? That you're lucky, or that you're finally becoming who you were always meant to be? As the bus approached, he gently nudged her forward. Some voices, once heard, don't go silent again. On the ride home, Elena caught her reflection. No longer hunched or hiding, she sat tall, facing the future. And for the first time in years, she felt something powerful and unfamiliar. Hope. The next 3 weeks were a blur of training. Elena juggled vocal coaching, stage presence workshops, and orchestral rehearsals. Domenico had assigned her to work closely with his vocal director, Catherine, a renowned soprano who, to Elena's surprise, was patient and encouraging. You're progressing faster than most conservatory graduates, Catherine said one day. It's like you've been preparing for this your whole life. Maybe she had been. The music she once learned to honor her father had become a bridge to her future. The day before the concert, Elena visited her father's grave. I'm going to sing for both of us now, Papa, she whispered, placing fresh flowers by the headstone. That night, a message lit up her phone. Symphony Cafe. Perhaps one farewell drink? George sat at a table, dressed in his Sunday best for once. Look at you, he said warmly. You carry yourself different now. Elena smoothed her jacket. It still feels like playing dress-up, like someone's gonna realize I don't belong. That feeling never completely goes away, George said. Some people are just taught from birth to ignore it. As they shared a quiet moment, Elena asked, Why did you believe in me? George's voice softened. Because 40 years ago, I was you. Different story, same fear. I missed chances. Helping you? Maybe it's my way of changing that. Elena smiled. It's not too late for you either. George chuckled. Actually, I auditioned. Community choir director at the Art Center. Watching you reminded me there's still time for one more adventure. As they parted, he handed her a worn book of Italian arias. Found this years ago. Couldn't sing it, but figured it might mean something to you now. The next evening at Symphony Hall, Elena joined the orchestra backstage, heart racing. Warm-up was interrupted by a familiar voice. Victoria, now attending as a library representative. Victoria offered a cool smile. Library administration thought it best someone experienced represented Hawthorne. Domenico's eyes narrowed. I wasn't aware of this addition. Elena kept quiet, rattled but composed. During the pre-concert reception, doubts crept in. Could she truly belong on that stage? Or was she just a librarian in a borrowed gown? The concert hall's grandeur dazzled and overwhelmed her. In the green room, old instincts kicked in as she unconsciously adjusted books on a shelf. The line between who she was and who she was becoming blurred. Minutes before curtain, Sophia came to escort her to Domenico. Elena feared the worst, but instead found him calm. Do you know why I brought you here? He asked. Because I can sing opera. Domenico shook his head. I have a dozen sopranos. I chose you because when others froze, you stepped forward. That kind of courage can't be taught. On stage, Elena steadied herself. The spotlight found her, and she began Puccini's soaring aria. Her first notes were tentative, but as the orchestra swelled beneath her, something remarkable happened. She wasn't singing anymore. She was telling her story, her father's story, through Puccini's notes. The audience leaned forward. Even Victoria seemed transfixed. By the final cadenza, Elena's voice soared with a freedom and authenticity that brought the audience to their feet before the last note had faded. Backstage, Elena was surrounded by well-wishers. Even Victoria approached awkwardly. You were better than I expected, she said. Elena didn't respond because she no longer needed to. Miss Moretti, an older gentleman, approached moments later. I'm with the Metropolitan Opera. I'd like to discuss potential opportunities. The surprise on Victoria's face said it all. That night, Domenico raised a toast to new beginnings and to seeing the extraordinary in plain sight. Later, in the empty concert hall, Elena sat at the piano, playing softly. The transformation wasn't in what she learned. It was in finally being heard, and more importantly, hearing herself. Victoria joined her, subdued. I underestimated you. Elena smiled. So did I. Domenico appeared, gazing out at the empty seats. What's next for you? Elena looked out, steady. I think I'd like to sing more of the world's Nika, not just in private. He smiled. I think that can be arranged. Elena pulled George's book of arias from her bag, flipping to a page. La musica, il respiro dell'anima. Music is the breath of the soul. Hers had started with a single act of courage, a choice to sing out. That step had carried her farther than she imagined, and it was just the beginning. 1 year later, Elena stood center stage at the Hawthorne Library's Grand Hall, the very building where she once shelved books in silence. Now all eyes were on her, as the featured soloist with the National Symphony and newly appointed artist-in-residence for their education program. Transformation isn't always about becoming someone new, she said confidently into the microphone between pieces. Sometimes it's about finally becoming who you already are. In the audience, Domenico watched proudly. Beside him, George, now director of the Community Arts Choir, nodded with quiet pride. When I first stood in this library, I believed I belonged in shadows. I buried my voice, convinced it wasn't valuable enough to share. Elena's voice didn't tremble. It rang with clarity. She glanced at Victoria, library staff, and patrons, some of whom once overlooked her. My turning point. A melody in a language of emotion I wasn't supposed to understand. I'd studied opera in memory of my father, never imagining it would lead here. Catherine smiled from the front row. This year taught me that our greatest limitations aren't external. They're the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, and when we're enough. She held up George's old book of arias. A wise friend once said, the things you're best at might never be heard, but don't let them die in silence. That changed me. Elena's voice grew stronger. We often wait for permission to shine, but worthiness isn't granted, it's claimed. When we choose to stop hiding, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's singing despite it. In the back, library assistants and staff listened with rapt attention. Last year I shelved books here. Today I perform internationally. The difference? I gave myself permission to be heard. As applause thundered, Elena stepped away from the microphone and caught her reflection in the polished grand piano. No longer the girl who shrank from attention, but a woman who had stepped fully into her light. Later, she stood with George at the reception. "Not bad for two people who used to be invisible," he said with a wink. Elena smiled. "I think about that day a lot, when I almost didn't enter that room. Everything could have been different." "But it wasn't," George replied, "and that's what matters." The young woman in a library ID badge approached shyly. "Miss Moretti, I just wanted to thank you. Your story really spoke to me." Elena took her hand warmly. "What's your name?" "Sophie," she replied. "Well, Sophie, whatever dream you're carrying, don't let go of it. It matters." As Sophie walked away, George murmured, "Look at you, passing it forward." "It's the least I can do," Elena said. "Someone once did the same for me." Across the room, Domenico brought over the Metropolitan Opera's artistic director. "Signor Bellini says your voice should be heard in every major opera house," Domenico grinned. Signor Bellini nodded. "In my culture, we say the most beautiful music often comes from the most unexpected places. You've proven that." Later, Elena stepped into the quiet stacks, running her fingers along book spines that once defined her days. She pulled out a photo of her late father. "We're making music together, Papa, just like you wanted." Inside the main hall, she caught the eye of a young library assistant arranging programs, head down, unnoticed. Elena smiled. The woman returned it and straightened just slightly. In that moment, Elena understood her journey wasn't just about areas or achievements. It was about voice, of self, of others. The courage to be fully heard and to hear others fully. Because the most powerful gift we offer isn't our success, it's our authentic selves. If Elena's journey stirred something in you, an untold dream, a quiet voice, a hidden gift, don't let it stay buried. Your voice matters, your dreams matter, and the world is waiting. Let's step into the spotlight together.